Welcome to Whispers to a Bride, where we talk about the stuff no one else is talking about. We are going deep on the emotional aspects of getting married, the stress, drama, and turbulence that affects your own sense of identity and your closest relationships. We are talking about what it means to be a bride and how to navigate this sacred time with more grace and ease. I'm your host, Kara Gasabay. As a life coach and therapist, I'm going to be sharing super practical tips so that you can not only rise to the occasion of your wedding, but also your life. So welcome back. I don't even know what episode this is, but it is so exciting. This is my first interview for you guys who listen all the time. I never do interviews. I'm so excited to welcome Meredith Lynch, the TikTok sensation. Like, she's TikTok gold. That's how I found her and fell in love with her. And if you're on TikTok, you know this woman. And I would describe you as sort of like a pop culture pundit, like just an incredible, just such poignant, brilliant analysis of everything that is going on in the world. I don't know how you cover all the topics, like all of the things that are happening, from late stage capitalism to the Kardashians to like makeup.
Well, I don't cover everything because somebody's very annoyed right now that I won't do Amy Robach and TJ Holmes because I'm like, I don't have it in me.
I know.
I don't have the one-liners. Thank you.
Topics.
It's wonderful to be with you, and it's wonderful to connect with you. And I love what you do. And I think it's really important. And I think it's a really amazing service. And I don't think enough people are thinking about the emotions and their mental health as they plan and execute and then come off of a wedding. So I'm really grateful to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yes, of course. Yes. And so obviously today's topic is all about grief and weddings. And this is a topic that I have been really, really wanting to dive into, but feel like it needs to be done the right way. And that's why I could not believe this opportunity presented itself. You went through your wedding process without your mother. And so if you could sort of just like walk us through a little bit what it felt like, even like young, because you were in high school, right? Like, or college.
Yes.
You were in high school.
High
Right.
school.
She was sick, and then and so you'll tell us all that. And then like, so I want you to talk about like, because I think a lot of people I talk to, they think about it way before the wedding even comes around. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Did it even enter your mind? And then to the wedding day, and then we'll.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. So my mom was sick for a very long time. So she had breast cancer and she was sick. She got sick when I was in 8th grade. And then she was basically very sick for like 4 years, like basically in and out of the hospital, in bed. I have 2 younger sisters and a dad, and they're all wonderful humans inside and out, but we all have our limitations. I come from a very Irish Catholic family, especially culturally, I would say.
Yeah.
So when it comes to things around illness, grief, etc., it was very much done with that Irish Catholic mentality of everything's fine, pull yourself up by your bootstraps and keep on showing up. And I think in a way that can be really helpful. So my mom died when I was a junior in high school, and then it was my dad, my sisters, and I. And my dad is just a wonderful, wonderful human, but he's not he's not a super emotional guy. And so when it came to things like going to pick out a prom dress or things of that nature, that was not something he was going to be involved in. And so my aunt would help me, or sometimes I would go by myself, and then my dad would come back with the credit card. He would just give me the credit card and I'd go by myself because my mother had done those things. My mother was, we talk about sometimes parenting, and I hate to say that it's like this, and I think it's changing. But my mother was what I would call the primary parent, in the sense that she didn't really work. My father worked a lot. He traveled a lot. And so my mother was the one who was home. She was the one who cooked dinner. She was the one who took you to get the poster board at 8 o'clock at night. Like, that was my mother's role. So without her there, my aunt stepped in and did some things. My father did some things. And then we did things on our own. Or, sadly, some things just didn't happen the way they used to. So that was the experience of losing my mother in the absolute cliff notes.
Right.
And when it came to things like dating and relationships, I always had in the back of my mind that my mother would not be there for this day, and also that she would never meet the person that I was going to be with. So that was always kind of in the back of my mind as I would get like maybe more serious with someone. Like I'd be like, oh my God, my mom is not here to like co-sign on this. My mom is not here to be like, this guy's a good guy or a bad guy. So that was also huge.
Absolutely. Like not the wedding, but just your person. She'll never know your person and get to share that, but also to approve it. Like you want your parents' approval on this huge milestone moment.
Yes. And my dad definitely like, I trust in his opinion, but there's, for me, and I think it's different for everybody, but for me, like my mom was somebody who was a straight shooter and I wanted her there to navigate not just my romantic relationships, but also like friendships, etc. And I think that I did have a very short time period. And I wonder if you've seen things like this with clients and other work that you've done or whatever. But I had a very brief time period where I only wanted to date guys whose mothers were dead.
Oh, yeah.
And I found one. I found this mother had died. And I found out through like a friend, and I was like, I have to date him. He's the only one who's going to get this.
Yeah.
And I did for a long time. And to be honest with you, I'm not saying that you can't, but I actually think like the balance of both of us not having our mothers was like actually chaos. After that, I was like, okay, I'm really glad I got that out of my system.
Right.
But, it felt like sort of in dating sometimes it would feel like I had this like sort of like embarrassing thing about me too, right? Like I had this sort of fractured family. I thought if I could find somebody who had that in common with me, that it wouldn't be so scary.
Yeah.
So that was sort of how it affected some elements of my dating life. And then obviously I then met my husband, and he's wonderful inside and out. And I knew like there was just something that I knew about him almost immediately that my mom would adore him. And we talk about my mom a lot, and I feel like he knows my mom in a lot of ways. But it is like it's hard. It's the fact that he has never met my mom and he never will. And he hears things in, dribs and drabs, etc. So that's hard. And we had been together for, wow, probably like 5 or 6 years. And we hadn't really thought about like, okay, are we getting married? Like we lived together. We had a dog together. We like did all of the things, and people would be like, are you guys going to get engaged? And we'd be like, yeah, maybe. But a big part of me, not all of me, because I think like these changes are hard for anybody.
Yeah.
But a big part of me was like, how can I do this? How can I have the wedding that I want to have without my mom there?
Yeah. And when you look back, you can sort of see that that was right in the background, probably holding you back a little and letting you be okay, maybe with stalling a bit. Whereas otherwise you might have been like, let's do this. And your mom might have been in your ear like, hey, girl,
right.
Tell this guy to lock it down. Let's do that. Like, right. She might have been.
And I think like one thing that I really love about my family is I would get a lot of those kind of comments of like, why aren't you guys engaged? Why aren't you getting married yet? From people who didn't really know us and didn't really know my story. But the people who knew me and knew what I had been through, I think they knew in the back of their minds that that's why I was holding back. And I would see friends go through the process and they relied so heavily on their mothers. And I would just be like, what am I going to do? Like, how am I going to navigate that? I can't put this on my sisters because it brings up emotions for them as well. I can't put it on my friends. It's not fun to have somebody dump all that on you. It's like not fun for a mother probably. And like, you have to also respect that. I remember I had a friend who was wedding planning and she was having an argument with her mother. And, her mom was being difficult. Okay. Her mom was being difficult. And she turned to me and she said, and she was complaining to me. And she said, you know what? I really shouldn't complain to you because you don't even have your mother. And I said, no, you can complain to me because if my mother was alive and I was in your situation, which I guarantee you, she and I would have had an argument, maybe not this one, I would be annoyed too. Yeah. Don't not complain to me because part of what made it okay for me to plan it was to realize like my mother would not have been perfect in planning my weddings. Right. We tend to idealize what this process will be like if only this person was there. And yes, things would have been a lot different, in a lot of ways better, but they were also, the way I ended up doing it was reflective of the way that I started living my life because my mom died. And parts of that are good, and parts of that are like, I think make me stronger. And then parts of that are just out of like, like survival.
Right.
So my husband and I talked about how we probably should get married. Like, it was getting to look like, this could become an insurance thing someday.
Right. There's that like the paperwork stuff that like sometimes you're like
Right.
better for marriage. Yeah.
Right. And you look at things like, okay, maybe we want to buy a house someday. Maybe like we want to combine like all of our finances and things.
Right.
I'm not saying you have to, but maybe it's
Right.
better. And there's a reason why people want the protection of marriage, right? Like there's that. And so I thought about the way that it would make the most sense for me. And what I decided was I didn't want to do like a big, huge thing. So I told my husband, don't propose to me. Don't propose to me because I don't want to go through all of that.
Right.
And he was like, okay, noted. I get it. Because I thought like that will bring up a lot of emotions.
Right.
And that will also put a lot of like pressure on me. So instead, we just went, we didn't tell anybody that we were doing this. We just went and looked at venues and booked a venue.
Nice.
And it was like no fanfare, no asking other people their opinion. It was just like, let's do this. And so I will say, like with that example, I think that is how I approached a lot of my wedding planning without my mom, was moment by moment, looking at it as a decision. I decided to get married in Kennebunkport, Maine, which was a place that my mother and I had a lot of really special memories. It's a place my mom had gone as a child. And it was a place growing up. I got married at this hotel that, like, growing up, I always wanted to go and stay in. And my mom was always like, that's too rich for our
Right.
blood. So
No
it was
way.
like,
Yeah.
yeah. So it was kind of this like fun sort of
Right.
thing to be able to do it there.
Right.
And I didn't have to make a big deal out of telling people getting married and, like I'm looking at venues. So then it just became like, hey, Mike and I have decided to get married. We've booked a venue. We are moving forward with this. And we just told our immediate families, and then we just let it go. And then other people found out, and, some people reached out and congratulated us. And like, that's great. But instead of like doing like a huge reveal, a huge announcement, it was, and then eventually we like put it on social media or something. But it was like, we had a lot of time to kind of sit with it. And we gave our families some time to sort of sit with like, this is how we're doing it.
I love that. I love how it seems like you took yourself out of like the bigger narrative, that once that ring goes on, this is what so many of my clients are like, what just happened to my life? You enter this like public stage that people don't really realize. Like you put that ring on and make that announcement, like, and all of a sudden, like critiques come in, questions come in, like assessments come in, unsolicited opinion, like so much comes in, and it throws people completely off the rails. And I think it was so smart how you knew, like, look, I don't want all that scrutiny. I don't want all that extra. It's going to bring up so many extra emotions. And this quiet, powerful, like, I'm going to do, and like the way that you were in communion with your mother, like, we're going to do like a week in a nod. We're going to do something that's important and special, but we're also not going to pull the family and see how they feel. Like, we're going to just calmly take action, and then everybody will join us there. Like, it's that leadership energy it felt like you really took, that is, so many women lose that, right? The minute they put on that ring, they lose all sense of like, who's in charge here? What do I want? What do I care about? And I love that you really stayed true to like what matters to you, and that your husband was right on the same page with you.
Yeah, I mean, he doesn't have a choice at this point. Just say it this way, because I just want to be like, I know it's really hard. One of the gifts of going through this experience without my mother is that I do have some more freedom, maybe,
Yes.
than other people have. I don't have, if my mother was here, I think she would have expectations. She would have thoughts. She would have ideas. And so I was like, believe me, I would do anything to have her here. But
Yeah.
I think the other piece of it is I had lived so many years of my life without her, right? I would think my mom had been dead for 17 years at that point. Like, I had done more of my life without her almost,
Yeah.
or at that point I had, than with her. So to continue to be who I am and like make these decisions in the way that I've made the decisions of the last years of my life without her only made sense. And I think sometimes what happens is like when people get engaged, like they forget who they are. Like they forget that they're like, it's like you've made decisions, you've gone to college, you have a master's degree, like you're badass. Like you can do this. If you can do all these other things, you can do this. It's just that there's so many emotions that come up and I get that. And so I think another thing that I did that was really important for me while I was going through this process is that I just kept going to therapy. And I think that's really important to have a safe space to like vent these things because of course, like people still gave me their unsolicited opinions and like that was okay. I don't think it was half as bad as it could have been if I had been like more open with everything. And maybe some people agree with this, maybe some people don't. I know it caused some frustration for some people in my life, but basically, like, I just kind of made the decisions myself. And then I outsourced things to external people who didn't really have an emotional stake in things. So, for example, I actually got my wedding dress with my husband, who was not paying any attention. I knew that the wedding dress thing was going to be really painful.
Yes.
And I think that that's like one of those things that I like was definitely when I like would look at the idea of getting married would stop me.
Yep.
So I just decided that I wasn't going to do the like have all the friends there, have all like the family there. I was just going to I went and looked at dresses once with like a friend who like she was a girl I worked with who was like in her mid-20s. Like she could not be more removed from like where I was. She's great. We're still
Yeah.
friends. But I was
Mhm.
like, "Hey, will you come with me?" But I knew it would be like no fanfare. Like
Yeah.
and she's a sweetheart, but like I knew that it was somebody that I could do this with. And then the next time I went, I just brought Mike and actually like I shouldn't it was just like total by coincidence. I just didn't have time to drop him off at home first. And I was like, "Yeah, just come with me."
Oh my
Like who
God.
cares?
Yeah.
And like I actually had a blast trying on wedding dresses because first of all, I love clothes. So like there's that. And the thing that I realized is what's hard for those folks about their jobs is like it's not the brides. It's all the other people who are with the brides.
Yep.
So they loved me. As and they were so sweet to me and kind to me, not because like, oh, it's so sad she's here alone. It was more just like I was like, I defer to you. What do you think of this? What do you
Yeah.
think of that? And they know better than anybody. And like, listen, they don't care what their friend's neighbor wore to a wedding
No.
2 years ago. They just care about what looks good on you. Also, they care about the sale, but like they're going to give you their honest opinion. And that is so much better. And you're not getting anybody else's emotional. I mean, I guess you could, but for the most part, nobody else's emotional baggage.
Yep. It's like you just took out so much of the noise in this whole process. Getting married is the noisiest process, which is why so many women lose their entire sense of like, who are they? Where are they going? What matters? That just they get consumed by the noise and especially around the dress. I was just talking to a woman who's like on her third dress, like the other night, because she's just like, well, the first time I got it because this person, and it's like the losing yourself in all of those voices is one of the biggest problems that I
Yes.
find. And I think the way that like what I love about sort of your story, it's like your creativity, it feels like really saved you. It's look, the narrative that like our culture puts out with like the mommy and me dress moment and to like zip you into the dress and to like that mommy me part of wedding is huge, right? Like we know it. I always talk about like when they handed us our baby at the hospital, they handed it to my husband was like, you're gonna walk her down the aisle one day. And I was like, there's
Okay.
so many things. Right.
There's so many
So
things
many
there,
things.
right? Exactly.
But it just reminded me because I was starting into this work and I was just like, this shit starts so early with
Right.
the parents being over identified with their child's wedding day. And so
Yes.
that's what, like you said, there is a weird silver lining, not that you'd call it that, but of like not having your parent, your mother, like there was an ease because you don't have this other person's ego that's been like ramping up for 30 years,
Right.
bringing to sink her claws into this day. And that's what like,
Exactly. And I remember when I was in there trying on dresses, there was a girl who was there with like a huge group of people. And like, I mean, maybe she was having the time of her life, but I gotta tell you, it didn't seem that way.
no, it
It
never.
seemed very tense. And like, I'm over here, Mike's on his phone, like checking the Patriots score. I'm just like vibing. I'm trying on dresses. And then I think that also not having all that noise made it a lot easier for me to make my decisions.
Yeah.
And I kind of carried that same thing with me when I made decisions around like things around colors, things around, decor. I wouldn't outsource it to a million people because I'm not used to doing that in my regular life. And it didn't feel natural. And I think like if you're somebody who typically doesn't outsource a million things in your life. You don't call your parents when you're like buying a car and saying like, do you like the silver or do you like the white? Then like maybe you don't do it with this as well.
Absolutely.
And I know that money can come into that, but that's, a whole other conversation.
Yeah.
But then when it came to other things, like I said, I applied that same approach. I hired a wedding planner. And a lot of people were like, at the time I was an event planner. We're like, why are you hiring an event planner? Like that seems silly to me.
Yeah.
But I knew what I wanted her for was different than what most people wanted her for. I hired her to, of course, help with like the execution and stuff. But I also hired her to basically do some of the things that a maid of honor would do because I did not have bridesmaids. I didn't have a maid of honor. I didn't have a bridal party. And for me, I thought that was really like it also helped take away some of the like expectation, the stress, etc. Everything I could do to take stress away for me, I did,
Good.
I think.
Girl, I love that.
And so I had her help me. And that didn't mean that I didn't have a fun morning. That's like what people get wrong. They think like, oh, then like, what were you doing all morning? I was with my sisters. We got our hair and makeup done. And like, we had a great time. So like, we still did the hair and makeup thing. And then they were free to like go hang out with their friends or go hang out with their boyfriend. Like, that was great. I was around. I didn't have to like be in a room taking staged photos. And like for some people that's awesome. That's what they want. But I literally like I was able to like go out and like be mingling with my guests.
Love it. Yeah.
And also like that ends up too allowing you more freedom at your actual wedding because you've spent time with people. So there was that. And then when it came to things like getting me food, getting me drinks during the day, she just did that. Like I just had her doing that stuff. And what's hard is when you are getting married and you have a friend who's like your maid of honor and they're your go-to person. Sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes like the day becomes a little less fun for them. And
Yeah.
like, I know they want to help you and all that kind
Right.
of stuff, but basically like outsourcing it to her. And also like I had a moment where I was having a really hard time with like some little last minute thing that came up and it brought up some feelings of my mom. It had something to do with like some photos that were going to be out.
Okay.
And I basically knew what I wanted to do. I was like, this is what I want to do, but I need you to do it. And she did it. Had I given that to somebody who was in my family,
No.
could have been really bad for them. But
Yeah.
because she did it, nobody cared.
I love that. I love that.
Because we're not going to get mad at like the nice person and
Right.
explain like 30 plus years of trauma.
Years of
to
trauma.
them.
Exactly. Exactly. It's like bringing the
And
clean hands and
yes. And that's what they're there for. They're
Yeah.
professionals.
Yep.
And I think she had a lot of fun, like not having to do some of like the normal stuff, like just being
keeping the
there.
mothers happy.
Right. Exactly. She put me in my dress and like got me ready to go. And at the end of the night, I started to feel kind of overwhelmed.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, I got to get out of here. And so I was like, can I go to my room and hide? And she was like, yeah, go to your room and hide for like 15 minutes. And then like most people will be gone. And then you can come back out and like vibe with like, your really close friends
Your
and
inner
stuff.
circle. Yeah.
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 And that's literally what I did. She like whisked me out, put me in my room. I changed into my bathing suit and I went swimming.
I love it.
I think if you have your mom there, it might be Meredith. These people traveled all over the country to see you get married. You need to be in there saying goodbye.
Mhm.
But I felt overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Which I think like people underestimate how overwhelmed you feel on your wedding day, dead mom or not.
I mean, completely. I thought I had all my stuff together and I was a full wreck. And I was like,
Yeah.
what's wrong with me? And thinking My mother is like this brilliant psychologist. She's always got my back. We're good friends. And my sister will be there. My sister was pregnant with a toddler. So like she's chasing him down the
Right. And
all the
she's
time. And my mother has got her out of town guests that guess what? They're more important than me on my wedding date. It makes sense, but I didn't do the math right. Like I just didn't
right.
see it coming. I was like, I thought you were gonna be all eyes on me. And instead,
Right.
but no, Uncle Bobby's here. We never see. I'm like, oh, I should have seen that coming, but I did it. So you're right. The emotional management of all your people. And I love that you didn't just say like, well, I don't have my mom, but I have my sisters and they'll just double up and do the, you were like, no, I got to protect them a little bit. It's going to be hard for
Yes.
them for really different reasons. I don't want, right? I don't want their stuff loaded onto me, but I don't want mine to spill onto them. And let's just have them stay in their sister role. Let's do the hair and makeup, but let them hang with their boyfriend, give them spaciousness, let them enjoy the day and not try to make up for what's not there. Like that
Right.
is just that honesty of it, right? And not have to have like auntie try to be mommy. Like it's, I just like that you built in space. Like
Totally.
there is an emptiness there, let it be there. And don't try to fill it with a million other like jerry rigged things that are never going to feel like the thing. Like,
And that's a really good point because there was a lot of pressure on me to do something to honor my mom in my ceremony.
yes, talk about that.
And I have to be honest with you, like that's just not who I am.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not that I don't love my mom,
Yeah.
and it's not that I don't miss her, and it's not that I don't feel her presence, but like a lot of people do things like having a chair with flowers on it,
Right.
or, they light a candle. And like I have such deep respect for that. But it didn't feel natural to me. It didn't feel like what I would do. It didn't feel like what my mother would want either.
Right.
Like just
Right.
knowing her. And so I decided that I wasn't going to. And so I don't regret that. I don't think like, I mean, like, it's one of those things where you're like, well, I guess I could have. And sometimes you see people do things, but you have to do what works for you in your ceremony. And I also thought like, oh my God, this is already so emotional, like for so many reasons, right?
Yes.
I don't want to do something that's like really going to set me off.
Exactly. Like really just like shine the light right on you when it's already so raw and so much happening for lots of reasons, but also
Yes.
it's right there in this new weird way that like, it's going to come, but let's not. And it's funny. I get the question all the time. Like, what do I do to honor my loved one? I'm like, honey, I can print you a beautiful list from Pinterest and Google with all of these, like, cool, make her favorite dessert and have it pass out as minis, have a cocktail named after her, have the picture of the chair, do a moment of silence, say her name 3 times. You can do a million cool things, but none of it is a good idea if it doesn't feel completely supportive of your emotional state on that day. And I think that so many people are looking for the right answer. And then they're also looking for permission to just take care of themselves that day and not have to
Right.
be practical.
And not
But
have to
what they
do it.
realize is they're doing that to show the other people how much they love their and right. Then once we get to that, it's like, no. Everybody,
Right.
you don't have to perform it unless that feels good to you. But once they take out the obligation to the crowd to show they love their person, so many people want that quiet, just she's there with you. Like that whole thing is so unspoken.
It's exactly. And I also think like getting married and living a life that I find to be fulfilling and that I'm proud of, that is the biggest way that I honor my mom. Like it's not like flowers on a chair. It's and like not that there's anything wrong with that, but
No.
it's just like that is who I am and that is what she would want because she was very much a like Meredith, I want you to like keep moving forward. That's all she would want from me. So doing something like that wouldn't be like would not hurt her feelings.
Right.
She would just be proud that I found someone that I want to build a life with and had this beautiful celebration and that I didn't fight with my sisters during the day.
Right. You let yourself love that deeply again. The fact that you showed up and had a wedding, I mean, that took a lot. So like, she's already so happy with that. Like living your best life, as Oprah would say,
Yes.
is the tribute to your mother. That's, I mean, my God, being a mom, that's all I would want for my kid. There is not any gimmick, right, that could ever, you want them to be them and to live deeply and have the bravery to do that after a loss and after all that. So that's the
Yes.
tribute. That's the tribute.
And then the one thing that I did do is that on my honeymoon, I bought like a special piece of jewelry to commemorate her And that was sort of like my little extra thing for her. And that's like something that I felt like I could share just the two of us. And so that was sort of my tribute to my mom.
And
And that has been, that's special because it's like I have this piece that I love that I, bought on my honeymoon and it reminds me of my mom. And that, like, for me is like more lasting than any other thing. And everyone has things that make their weddings hard.
yep.
That's the other piece of it. So I think like when I remember too that like, well, just because someone's like mom is here doesn't mean that their wedding is easy or perfect or
No, and I think you're right. Like, it's probably very easy to think about that when you're in that
Mhm.
situation that like, oh, if my mom was here, this would all be when right. Most 90% of my clients are calling me because their moms are driving them over the edge and they can't, right? The ego wars and just the drama and the control and the money and all the things. But I think it's like you said, it's just knowing that maybe the grief is going to show up in a different way around a milestone. And how do I build in my support for that? Like, it sounds like you were just like, yes, therapy. We are just locking and loading that. We are not going to like
Mhm.
sleep on the skills and the tools that we've already been useful for. And then creative, being stealthy, being low profile, putting in space, doing it your way, right? Rising to be the person that she raised you to be. Like, I think that is such a great reminder of like, and enjoy the good parts about having a little more independence, a little more freedom, and a little
Oh
more
my
like
God.
do what you want
I had a blast.
without the
Like
mom.
I had
Right.
so much fun and I had, I think, so much permission to just do
Right.
things the
You're
way that I want to do things.
yeah.
I mean, obviously I had a husband there as well, but
But we
like,
know what we mean. The feminine aspect, you got to really lead the whole
yes.
show, which is great.
And, after it was done, I definitely had a little bit of those post-wedding blues, and I think it's really
Mm.
important to acknowledge those. And I think I was surprised that I had them because, like, I had so much emotion, like, going into it of, like, "This is hard," and then I was like, "Oh my god, I miss it." And I think, like, part of it is just the time. Like, you spend so much time.
Yeah.
Like, you're like, "I didn't realize I had so much time on my hands."
And it was complete right, because it was like all the wedding project. Like it became
Yes.
like the side hustle, it became like the hobby, it became like the thing.
So I think like having something waiting for you right after it's done is really important. And that really helped. Like my husband and I took like a couple like special trips and
Yeah.
did a couple of like home projects, etc. And I would say like when I look back on it though, like we say this all the time, I'm like, I would rather die than have to do that again.
Yep.
Like,
Yeah.
I'm so glad I did it. I'm so glad I did it, but I'm so glad it's over. Like,
No,
once
not
you
doing
take a
that
little
again.
extra space, like, you're like, "Oh, wow, okay, great. Glad I did it." And I think that's a really good thing to know for people who, like, are in that first, like, post-wedding blues mode is,
Yes.
like, 6 months from now, you're gonna be, like, I don't know, knee deep in, like, crocheting, and you'll be like, "Thank God I found a new hobby that's not wedding planning, that doesn't drain my bank account."
Exactly. I think right after it's like it was everything and then it's just gone. So I think it's just the
Mhm.
abruptness of the day after that can be hard, but right. Having something waiting for you and realizing, right, give yourself a few months. You're not going to be wishing you were back in that Excel sheet and that budget and that vendor
Never.
emails and all that drama. Like, no.
Yeah. That is sort of my story, and I am, grateful to be able to share it, and I hope that it's helpful for someone somewhere someday.
Oh my God. Absolutely. I think it is just amazing to hear it right from your mouth, just keeping it super real, seeing the good parts of it, the hard parts of it, and most important, like just your innate knowing of how to care for yourself in this moment is the key, right? Like, I just want
Right.
to trust you know how to take care of yourself. You know what your grief had needed in the past. Anticipate that it will show up around your wedding just because it's probably going to, and then take care of yourself in that way. And I just think that the way you sort of walked us through that is just so helpful. Thank you so much. You are a
Oh,
genius and a
thank
treasure
you.
and a gift to social media and the world. I love it.
Thank you. I'm very grateful. Thank
Thank
you for
you
having me.
so much, you guys. Check out Meredith on TikTok and Instagram, right? And we'll link all of you
Yes.
in the show notes
Thank you.
with like the best content anywhere. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Thank you.